We're live.
Boom.
Yeah, we're in.
Cool.
Yeah, let's go. So we're back with another episode of the Make It Mastermind podcast. And this week we've got Michael Maisey. You might have seen him on SAS, Who Dares Wins. Probably most famous for that, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah. That's the most recent thing I've done.
Yeah, but aside from that, do you want to give people a bit of background, your age, where you're from, where you grew up, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So, age 36, grew up in London. I'm an actor, author, entrepreneur. Got a book coming out in July. I was in a TV show called Birds of a Feather when I was a kid. Then got into loads of trouble as a teenager. Went to prison at a young age. Was convicted of armed robbery, possession of firearms. Spent like most of my teenage years in and out of prison. Come out, then went back for attempted murder. And then it was like my last prison sentence. When I was 18, my mum got sober, and that was like a bit of a turning point for me. You know, I always wanted my mum to get sober. You know, my dad was a drug addict. He's still a drug addict today. And that was like a turning point for me. And sort of, you know, I come out of prison aged 18, went to my first AA meeting, and eventually got sober aged 25. And I've been sober ever since. Been sober 11 years. Set up a business, successful business. Won an award from the Metropolitan Police for going back into prisons and trying to help youngsters who took the wrong path in life. Wrote a book, went back to acting, done SAS, got 2 kids, created a free online program for addiction, run a men's retreat on my land in Devon. So yeah, that's it.
Wow.
There
you go. There's a lot to get into.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, do you know, so let's touch more, I guess, on your early life.
Yeah, sure.
What was life like for you? What was school like? I guess it doesn't sound like you maybe had like an average childhood, so what did that look like? And yeah, how was it from such a young age?
Yeah, it was tough. My mum come from a gypsy background, a traveller background, basically. Yeah. Right. So she basically, you know, she was born in a caravan at the side of a road. And she grew up sort of with a very difficult childhood herself.
Right.
Then she moved to England and met my dad, who was like the sort of knight in shining armour. You know, this guy who, you know, was young, good looking, could handle himself in a fight. And they had a very passionate relationship, but also, you know, a very violent relationship. They both drunk a lot, you know, and it often turned violent. And so, you know, my dad left before I was 1, and I basically grew up with my mum, primarily my mum. And when I was about 3-4 years old, I think it was about 3 or 4, my uncle Tommy came to live with me, and he was the youngest of all her brothers and sisters, and he didn't grow up in the traditional traveller way. He got taken into care and grew up in a children's home that was run by priests, and he was basically sexually abused from a young age. He came to live with us, and so he basically sexually abused me as well, and that was something that was difficult for me as a kid because I was sort of sworn to secrecy by him. He would always talk about his associates back in Ireland being linked to the IRA and stuff like that, and I remember making a decision then when I was about 4 years old that this world, this universe is not a friendly place. Mm-hmm. That the people who hurt you the most are normally the people that are closest to you, and the people that are meant to care for you and look after you often lie and fucking let you down in a massive way. Like my dad had left, my mum was an alcoholic, she'd say stuff, she wouldn't follow it through, and she invited people into my home that fucked me, basically. Do you know what I mean? Hurt me. It was physical abuse, sexual abuse. It was just fucked up shit. Yeah. And so it was from that moment of, right, this world ain't a friendly place. Okay, now I go into strategic mode of, I need to figure out how I'm going to survive this fucking hell. And I created like an adapted version of myself that was basically in survival mode, you know, constantly strategizing. And so I grew up in school as a kid who sort of could be playing in the playground, and then someone would call me a name, and I'd go from 1 to 10, like bang, like really quickly. And the teachers couldn't get it. Other people couldn't get it. no one ever took the time to sit me down and go like, why are you so fucking angry, man? Like, what's happened? You're just, no one could get it, and no one asked me, and so I never spoke about it. I never told anyone about the sexual abuse, and in all honesty, I carried it. I carried the shame of it, like somehow it was my fault, somehow I invited it, somehow it was because I was naughty or I was a bad person or I was a bad kid. I tied that into my dad leaving. That's probably why your dad left, because you're a fucking little shit. You probably deserved that sexual abuse. This is all the stuff I was carrying as a kid, which basically just made me angry with the world. It's like, if this is what the people who love you treat you like, then imagine what everyone else out in the world is going to do to you. And so that was it, really. Growing up as a young kid with all this stuff going on in my mind, full of rage. And then I get to the age of 12 and I discover alcohol and drugs. And, I remember having this experience of when I first drank, and all this pain in my mind, all this stuff I had going on just stopped. It all just went quiet. And I was like, I wasn't addicted to alcohol or drugs. I was addicted to escaping reality. That's what I was addicted to, that feeling where I didn't have to live with the pain and the trauma of what I'd been through in my life. And so with being addicted to sort of that, the drink and drugs, and you have to feed the habit, and I'd done crack and heroin all by the age of 13, and and then I got into armed robberies age 14, and then eventually got nicked for one when I was 15, which back then in London there weren't many 15-year-old kids doing armed robberies, and
so it was all through that you found people in that world and
yeah,
to be doing these armed robberies with. Was it like, I guess, through drugs, the alcohol, that's brought those kind of people around? And
basically, like where I grew up on a council estate, and I would say 50% of the families there, the dads weren't around. Either they were around and they were violent alcoholics or drug addicts, or they weren't around because they didn't give a shit, or they were in prison. And so it was like a load of kids growing up where the male role models were like the elder kids in that community. So like I just started hanging around with, kids who were like 4 or 5 years older than me, watched how they spoke, watched how they handled confrontation, how did they act when there was a fight, how did they do this, how did they do that. Started plugging me into all hip hop and rap music, Wu-Tang Clan, Tupac, Biggie Smalls, watching films like Menace to Society. And that was the one, I remember I watched Menace to Society where that guy with the dreadlocks, he has a gun. Have you ever seen that film?
Yeah.
You seen that film? Yeah. Mm-hmm. He goes into the shop and he what do you say about my mama? And I was like, shit, I need to get me a fucking gun, man. And I was like, I remember saying that to the elders in the community. They're like, what do you mean get a gun? We're not, even they were like, we can't get a fucking gun. They were only like 18. I was like 14 at the time. And then watching a film, Goodfellas. I don't know if you've seen that scene where he messed with his girl and then he goes over to where he's polishing his car. He smashes him over the head with a gun. That was a defining moment. I saw that and I was like, I got to get a fucking gun. And so yeah, that's sort of how I got into all of that. It was like, hanging around with elders and becoming addicted to the power. So I remember the first time I beat someone up in a fight, and the mad respect I got for that. So not only was I addicted to escaping reality, I also came from a world where I had no power. So I had no power over who come into my fucking bedroom at night and fuck to me. And now I know I can go and bash someone up and no one would dare even fucking blink an eye at me. So I became addicted to that power as well. And so it started off with bashing someone up, and then it started off with robbing a drug dealer, and then it was like I now want a gun, and now I want an armed robbery, and now it just went on,
escalating.
It just escalated, armed robbery, and then come out, and then back in for attempted murder, and then come out, and then police tried to fuck me, and then I assault a police officer, back in for assaulting a police officer. All of this was going on. No one stopped and was like, what's up with this kid, man? This kid is like, he's been to prison 3 times. He's not even fucking 18 years old. And these are mad offences. Yeah. And it was a youth justice worker called Tony. and she was from like the Caribbean, and I don't know where you're from, but a lot of my mates who are from the Caribbean, they have quite a fiery, personality, and she was able to cut through the bullshit and just be like real with me, just be like, what are you doing, and it was the first person who really asked me directly, like, what is going on in your life? And although I never spoke to her about it, it was enough to just get me thinking, why am I? Like, what's going on? And trying to untangle it all. So yeah, in a nutshell, it was like the elders in my community became like my father, my male role models.
And that tends to be the case a lot of the times, isn't it? In these estates, that's what these young kids have to, or the only thing they have to look up to, right? It's money, power. Yeah. See them with the girls, cars.
And it looks achievable. Yeah. Like that's something you can see and like, oh, I can get there. Other people have done it from my estate. So it's doable. It's not like, oh, I can go be a businessman. There's no businessman in your estate. But you can go and be a drug dealer or, someone that people respect, like you were saying.
Yeah, of course.
So it's something, it happens a lot. You're right. It happens a lot.
It does, mate. And I think, that's for me where my lack of self-belief came from. Do you know what I mean? My lack of self-belief came from two areas. It was my history. So my history told me that like the men in my family history all drink, use drugs, go to prison. And then I look at my community and no one else is doing well. So I look around, no one else is doing well. All the men before me have fucked shit up. You're almost destined to go down the same path.
Did it kind of give you a free pass to act like you wanted to act though? Was there ever a point where you thought, fuck, I'm doing the wrong stuff here? Did you ever have them moments when you were like, oh, fuck, shouldn't really be, this is fucking crazy? Or were you just
survival? Or
will you just have that tunnel vision of next thing, not really thinking about the future too much? Like, oh, like you were saying, started with armed robbery and it just escalated.
Yeah, it was.
Do you know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
I get it, and it was just like sort of, I was so addicted to the process of escaping reality and feeling powerful that I didn't stop to look around what was going on. Like I grew up in an environment where I'd had power over very few things, and I carried this trauma with me for a long time. And now I found a way to manage that trauma through taking drink and drugs by forgetting, and also not feeling like I'm powerless by feeling like I'm powerful. By being the toughest, scariest motherfucker out there. When really if you peel all that back, I'm a scared little kid who's had a terrible life. Really, that's who I am. But I made a decision back then that there's no place for this kid. If he can't survive. So now I call it the security guard.
Yeah.
So now the security guard is like saying to the little boy, you just sit down, son. I'm going to handle these motherfuckers. Now you got to deal with me.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I carried into the world. When people met me, they met the security guard. They didn't meet the scared little boy, So, yeah.
So with that, then I guess, the jail time from such a young age, did that change your thought process? Because a lot of people will go to jail at a young age, and it can either go two ways of, okay, I'm going to reflect on what I've done, or, okay, I'm going to learn how to get better at this shit. So... which kind of way did it go for you when you first got your first sentence? And
well, first of all, the first sentence that was like really going down the route of I want to do more. Like I always had this thing where there was this kid in my neighborhood who'd been to prison, and he had mad street credibility, and we'd drink and we'd get fucked up and stuff, and he'd tell everyone about these mad stories from prison, and it was like his street credibility was a lot higher because he'd been to prison. So the first time I went to prison, I was excited. I was like, I'm going to have mad street cred when I come out now, And really it was like going to university and getting a degree in crime and how not to get caught, because you spend 23 hours a day in a cell with other criminals discussing what you're in for, how you got caught. And so you just end up educating yourself. Okay, if I do that crime, I know what not to do so I don't get caught, right? And so I come out of prison and it was like, okay, well, I've got some new ways to make money. And I know how the police are catching people because I've found out from all the people I've shared a cell with. So it was like that, really, Wow. Yeah.
So it was actually just a mastermind of, how to get better at crime at that time. Did you feel like there was no way that prison would have reformed you back then. There was no methods within prisons that would have changed the course of your life.
No, definitely not back then when I was in there. There was no, like, you had to, in order to get out of your cell to have education or to go to the gym, to exercise and stuff like that, you had to have privileges and you had to behave well. But you had to do it for the first 3 months. So if you had anything in the first 3 months, any trouble, then you'd almost go back to the beginning again, right? And like, it's just inevitable that for me being a white kid back then, the way it worked in then, this is no offense to anyone, but it was like 80% black kids, 20% white kids, yeah? And out of the 20% white kids, I would say 15% of them white kids just got bullied and robbed, yeah, for their shit, right? So the 5% were white. So you either done that and kept your head down and kept out of trouble, or if you're in the 5% who stood up for themselves, which I was, it doesn't mean you win the fight, it just means you don't hand your shit over, then you're not going to get any privileges, you know? And so like every time I went to prison, always in the first 3 months, I'd have a fight because you're just proving to someone, okay, look, I might not win this fight, but I will fight you back, you know? And so essentially all of my time was 23-hour bang up. That was it. 23 hours every day, just locked in a cell, you know? And that's all we do. We just talk about crime all the time. How did you get caught? I done this. How did your mate get caught? How did this? And you talk about other guys that you've been banged up with in this story. And you end up just with an education on all this crime, how you got caught. And especially if it goes to trial and the police have to document every bit of evidence of how they caught them. That's educating the guy who committed the crime, how they caught him, which then gets passed on to every other inmate on the wing, you know, so
wow,
it's a flawed prison system in my opinion.
Yeah, when you break it down like that, because obviously, you know, we don't have enough knowledge on that sort of stuff. We had a similar podcast with a boxer called Ishmael Davis that went to prison at
quite a young age,
16, probably very, very young. And it was only the second sentence that really changed the way he thought when he read a book, and that's what switched his mindset. But I wanted to exactly. I just wanted to pull it back though. Was armed robbery the first crime that you were arrested and sentenced for? That
was my first offence. Yeah.
Fucking hell, you don't mess around, do you? Just straight in.
Yeah. Well,
how did that event come about?
Yeah.
And
so
can you talk about the events around that?
Yeah, sure. So it started off with like watching Menace to Society. Yeah. And this kid who had this gun, you know, who just, in my eyes, had all of this power in his neighborhood. Like, no one messed with him. He pulled his gun out. Everyone was just like, you know. And for me, that power was seductive. I wanted that. I was like, I'd love to have that, you know, because it's, in my eyes, it's protection against all the people that hurt me when I was a kid, right? I'm going to have so much power. No one is ever going to fucking do that to me again, right? And so that's where it started, was that, you know. And then, you know, I got, I didn't manage to get hold of a real firearm. I got an imitation firearm, you know, and just started, you know, I'd always, you know, robbed from shops and then like picked up a crate, you know, if I wanted to drink, I'd just go in the shop, pick up a crate of Stella and just run out. If it was like, you know, if it was like, it's terrible to say, but if it was a woman or an elderly person, I'd just fucking walk out. I'd just be like, I'm just taking this shit. That was my mindset at the time. I was just angry, an angry kid, right? And then suddenly when I thought about getting a gun, I thought, yeah, I don't even need to run if I get a gun. And I don't need to just take a crate of Stella. I'll take the till, I'll take the fags, I'll take the champagne, I'll take it all. And so it was like, man, it was like, I need to get a gun. And so, you know, it started off with that, you know, it started off with, you know, doing them. And, you know, obviously I can't say too much about everything I got up to, you know, I'd done lots of crazy stuff, man. But eventually I was stupid and I'd done one right on my doorstep. You know, I woke up, you know, angry, pissed off. I went and done one on my doorstep. And, as I come out, I pulled the balaclava off and the paper boy was there. And there was a moment where me and the paper boy, and the camera's looking at the door, me going out. It's got the back of my head, but it's got the paper boy coming in. And he'd seen my face. On the camera, you can see he'd seen my face. The camera can't see my face, though. And the police just, you know, were like, you know, interrogated him, said, look, you're a paper boy, you live locally. You've seen this guy's face, do you know him? And put pressure on him, and eventually he caved and said, yeah, it's Michael Maisey. And, you know, I remember that moment when the flying squad came to my house with assault rifles and woke me up. And they woke me up with an assault rifle poked me in the head. I was asleep, and I felt something poking my head, and it was the end of an assault rifle. And I was 15, right? And they were like, "Get out of bed, really slowly. Do not make any sudden movements." And I remember this moment of just pure terror. I was just like, "Fuck, this is real now."
So you were still living out of your mum's then throughout this?
I was still living at my mum's, yeah.
And did she know what you were getting up to? And
She
did
didn't.
you kind of keep that kind of quiet from?
She didn't, but you know, you got to remember, like my mum, she had another 3 kids,
Right.
you know, and she was battling alcoholism herself. So like she was trying to hold things together herself, you know, like, and I'm just out on the streets wild. So she didn't really know too much about it. She was shocked when it happened, you know, police turning up with guns and stuff to the house. It was a big deal. Like, you know, they brought in the, like, I think he was like one of the head of the local police then to my cell to say, like, you need to have a word with this kid. He come in and had a word with me. He was like, you know, you're going to end up either killing someone, either dead, or doing life in prison at this rate. Like, you're 15, it's your first offence. And I'd love to say it sunk in, but I just felt proud. I felt really fucking proud that he was like the head of police saying this to me. That was my mindset at the time. You know, it's crazy, but I felt proud of that. But looking back in hindsight, I wish the conversation would have gone, "Why are you so angry? Why are you doing this?" And it might have opened the door to me saying, "Well, because of this, because my dad's a heroin addict and my mum's an alcoholic, and I was sexually abused and I was physically abused." It might have been a different conversation instead of just sort of coming down and pointing the finger at me.
Trying to use, I guess, trying to scare you out of it.
Yeah, you know, and
about that.
I'm not, but like I'd been beaten, I'd been, you know, sexually abused. Like nothing you say is going to scare me. You know what I mean? I've had that all my life. If you had to come to me on a vulnerable level and been like, "What's going on?" I might have opened the door to something different. And you know, that's really what I try and do with guys that I speak to when I go back in prisons now is, you know, can I ask a thought-provoking question from a vulnerable place that opens the door to a different conversation, one that's not like all up here, ego, I'm the tough guy sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, that's it. So how long you came out reoffended? What kind of, how did your mindset not change? It clearly didn't change because you reoffended, but did it, when you were in prison, did it reaffirm all that you wanted to be like? The trajectory of your life just carried on at that level of, I want to have respect when I get out. I want to have this and that and the other.
It wasn't actually. I mean, when you read my book, you'll hear about like what happened in my first prison sentence. It was like some crazy stuff. I went in with the wrong mindset. I was like, you don't have to be the toughest kid. You just have to stand up for yourself. And I like, in hindsight, the second 2 times I went back after that, I played it completely differently because I just went in as like, you know, how I was on the streets, and a young, angry, wild kid. I had no thought of like, okay, this guy clearly runs a wing. These are all his mates. I just went in like, okay, you're all against me. I'm just going to fight all of you. You know, and it didn't work out well for me, basically.
It didn't sound like a great plan.
No, it was a terrible plan. But I was, you know, a young 15-year-old, you know, kid, like, you know, and so I came out of prison and I was like, I definitely don't want to go back to prison, man. I don't want to go back there. It sucked. You know, I'd spent, you know, all that time, 23 hours a day just sitting in a cell.
How long was that sentence for, sorry?
It was about, I think it was about 6 months in total. So I didn't actually get sentenced then. I spent all of it on remand. And then when I went to court, the judge and my solicitor was like, they presented this case like, look at this kid's life. Yeah. Look at everything he's been through, and it's his first offence. If we lock him up for, you know, God knows how many years, what are we going to do? Do you think he's going to just pop out? You know, he needs support.
That's actually great. That's actually very kind of sensible, isn't it?
It is,
you don't really hear about that.
Yeah. And you know, like I left and I came out, and I did want to change. I did, and I remember like going for jobs. I couldn't get any jobs. You know, people were like, "Where you been? What have you done? You know." Have you got any GCSEs? No. Why not? I was in prison. What was you in prison for? This. And then it was just like everything ended quite quickly, yeah? And then it was like, you know, my mate, who was like one of the elder kids from my neighbourhood, we went out, we was drinking one night. And actually, let me fast forward a bit because I went for all these jobs, couldn't really get a job. And then I was like, I'm going to apply to the army. I was like, surely I can get into the army. Like going on the front line, if I apply for an infantry regiment and I'm on the front line with a gun, surely they'll let me in there. And I went to the careers office in like Covent Garden, and the police officer the army officer just sort of like laughed me out of the careers office. He was like, I was honest. I was like, I've been to prison. He was like, what for? I said, armed robbery. He was just like, yeah, nah, it's not going to happen, mate. It's not going to happen. And that was like the moment for me where I was like, okay, I can't get a job. Even the infantry regiment won't accept me. And then there was all the people from my neighbourhood earning easy money. And I was just like, fuck it. I'm going back to my own way of life, you know. And one thing led to another, and before you knew it, I was back inside again.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's always the case with anything. So like you come out of prison, or like, it's not the same, but we've had people that say when you come out of the army, like you don't have any skills either way. You've been away for whatever reason.
Yeah, fitting back into like society.
There's no route back to society, and prison's obviously meant to be a punishment, but what's the point of prison if you're just not gonna? If people are never gonna change.
Yeah, if you come out of prison and you can't fit into society, right?
It's pointless. Like you're just making these people feel isolated. It's crazy. Like I pay tax that fund prisons. I don't want them to just lock people up and away from me. Yeah. I want them to make society better.
Yeah, right.
That's what I would. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's I do have sympathy for stuff like that, especially when you come out with the intentions of, I want to fucking change. Like I don't want to go back in there. Help me not go back in there. And it's like, yeah, well, we don't want to help you. Try these guys on.
Yeah.
We don't want to help you either. It must just be just disappointing. You must be like, fuck, like I've done my time and I don't.
Probably makes you want to go the other way even harder now, right?
Exactly.
It does, yeah.
Tell us what was it like then? So
because like you face rejection, which I always, as a kid, somehow blamed myself for all the stuff that happened to me. Your dad left, it's probably your fault, probably because you're naughty. That's probably why that you were abused and neglected. So these are all subconscious things that I look back in hindsight now, right? But then you get older and you come out of prison and you try and change and stuff, and that voice kicks in again. See, you're just a fucking piece of shit. You're just not meant to have. You just need to go back to the fucking way and earn money the way you know how. That's the life that's destined for you. That's like my ego talking to me, And so it was a case of like going back. It started off, okay, I'm not gonna do armed robberies. I'm just gonna hang out with my mates, and then we were drinking, using drugs, and that's when the attempted murder thing happened. We was out one night in Twickenham, which is a part of London where I grew up in, and it's known for rugby. It was a big rugby event, and there was a couple of guys who were sort of rugby type guys who we never connected with because we were from the streets. If anyone's been to Twickenham rugby ground, you see them big tower blocks next to the stadium. That's where
I've driven past it.
Yeah, right. So we grew up in them tower blocks, right? Which was like, for us was tough because like you've got all these rich neighborhoods around you, and we grew up in like a slum. You know what I mean? And it really was shoved in our face when there was an event on at Twickenham when it was rugby, because you had a lot of people from wealthy backgrounds all there, drunk, getting loud, and we were like the kids with nothing, and so it was a night, and my mate who's from South American family, was racially abused. Someone called him a racial word, and a fight kicked off, and it just went too far, and I didn't do the stabbing, but I was there, and I was the one out of all the friends who'd already been to prison and already had a record. And so they pulled me and him in, and was like, okay, we know there was a fight. Who stabbed the guy in the throat? And we have a code of the street. Like you don't fucking grass. So I was like, no comment. And they was like, you're both gonna go to prison. And I was like, fine. And I lived by that code of the street. So then I went to prison. We both got sent to prison. And then I think it was about 6 months into that, we're waiting for trial. A witness come forward who saw the whole thing and said it wasn't. They showed 2 pictures of the guys who were locked up for it, and they said it wasn't him. It was him who'd done the stabbing. And suddenly my solicitor went back to the court and was like, you know, I demand his release. We've got an eyewitness report. It wasn't him who done the stabbing. And yeah, I got, you know, a thing called Judge in Chambers, which is like this urban myth in prison, right? You know, everyone talks about, oh, you get Judge in Chambers. The prison guard comes to your cell randomly and is like, you're going home.
Right.
And yeah, it was just random. One day, the prison guard opened a flap on my door and was like, Maisey, pack your stuff, you're going home. And I thought it was like another inmate winding me up. So I just sat on my bunk and, you know, done a roll up and that. And then he come back and was like, you're going home, you got Judge in Chambers. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. My mate, I think he got 4 or 5.5 years. And then I got released back into the neighborhood with the same set of problems I had before. Is like, okay, well now how do I, you know, get a job and try and live normal when most of my mates have been, you know, doing an apprenticeship, doing driving lessons. I've spent most of them, all that time behind a door in a cell for 23 hours a day. And
so what was the plan then? So how did you, I guess, kind of try to create a normal life?
Yeah, that's
once
it.
you came out the second time, I mean, did your mindset change? Seeing your friend going in there for 5 years, did you try to think any differently, or was it still the same when you came out?
It was. I felt hopeless coming out the second time, because the first time I came out, I had all these fantasies in my mind. I'm going to do this and I'm going to apply for jobs here. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to apply to the army. And if that doesn't work, you know, and I was convinced one of these avenues would work. And after none of them worked, the second time I come out, I just accepted, like, it's fucking pointless trying to get a job. I've been there. I know the army won't accept me. So I just got to, you know, see what I can do, you know. And it was the same process again of coming out, trying, you know, to get a job, not getting one, and then seeing my friends around me all doing well, and then just like falling back into crime, you know. And the third time it was like, I got to a point where I had no money and I was like, okay, I've decided I'm going to go back and start doing crime. What is everyone doing? And it was a time in the sort of late 90s where everyone was taking crack and heroin. It was like a bit of an epidemic where we were. It's probably the same up here, right? And everyone was like, no, we're not committing crime anymore. We're all selling crack and heroin. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I was just like the worst fucking drug dealer. So I just took all my own shit, man. I just, you know, I just used to get high and then I'd have to go out and, you know, rob someone to pay it or rob another dealer, or, you know, I was just terrible. And then eventually I was on the run for loads of offences, like assault on police, burglaries, like, you know, and the police sort of, I think tactically let me run up a big long list of offences, you know, and eventually I got nicked and got sent back, and I had about 8 things they'd nicked me for. And because I'd just been wild living on the streets, I was taking crack and heroin every day. I didn't realise, like, I was just getting fucked up every day, you know, alcohol, drink, drugs. And I went back and I was like a fully blown heroin addict. Like, I'd taken it every day for like, you know, 6 months. And I remember, you know, I got to the police station. I was like, I don't feel right. They give me all this stuff. And then someone sat me down. How much heroin have you used? I was like, yeah, I used about 20, 30 quid's worth every day for the past 6 months. They was like, oh shit, okay, you're dependent. You're drug dependent. So they gave me all these tablets and stuff. And then when I got to young offenders, they put me on the detox wing. I was given 2 options for detox, a 14-day detox or a 7-day detox. And I don't think the 7-day detox is around anymore, but it was a way of like a very intense detox, like it flushes you out. And of course, me being that like knucklehead guy I was back then, I was like, give me the 7-day detox, man. Let's just ride this shit out. And yeah, it was just ridiculous. You know, I think it was about 48 hours into it, and you know, I just decided that's it. I'm killing myself. I'm taking my own life. And on my second time in prison, there was a white kid who got bullied and eventually hung himself. And he done it with the bed sheets. So he wrapped the bed sheets up and made it like a rope around the bars. And so I remembered that when I'm in my cell detoxing from heroin, I'm like, yeah, I can fucking do this. I remember that guy had done it with the bed sheets. And so, you know, I spent all this time doing it all, and you know, that was it. You know, hung myself from the bars, and it was just randomly on the hospital wing. Everyone's detoxing on this wing, right? From some sort of drug addiction, and the prison guard has to go round like randomly at different times and just open the flap on your door just to check like you're all right, you're not foaming at the mouth, you're not dying or something. And I hung myself and I passed out, and just randomly at that time he'd checked my door and had I woke up on my bed being brought back to life. And so a couple of minutes later I'd have been gone. And then that was like they brought me back to life, put me in a padded cell. I spent I'd say in the next few weeks in a padded cell, so I couldn't hurt myself. And then it was the visit from my mum. My mum got wind of it, and then my mum visited me. And normally, when someone visits you, you go into. Have you ever been to a visiting room in a prison? Yeah. So you see, like, there's loads of inmates there, right? This is normally, from an inmate's perspective, a chance for the inmates to prove, like, yeah, I'm okay in here. I'm the top dog. This ain't phasing me. This time, my mum come to visit me. I had all the bruises around my neck. I was just like broken, physically, emotionally, mentally. I was just completely broken, and you could see that on me. But I still managed to hold it together until my mum sat down in front of me and said, "I'm sober," and I just burst into tears. Like all this pain, emotional pain, everything just come out like. I spoke about the security guard and the little boy. Like the little boy just jumped out for his mum. You know what I mean? And then it was that was like one of them moments of like, shit, maybe this crazy tough guy you've created isn't actually who you are. Maybe there's something more here. Maybe it's just a mask you've had on all this time to protect you from all the stuff that's been going on in your world. And that was like the sort of turning point for me. One of many, but that was like a big one.
Yeah. So that's it.
Deep, that, man.
Yeah, that's kind of. I was just, nothing was kind of. I was kind of like focused on what you were saying. I was just
Picturing it in your
totally trying to fucking get my head around it. So when you came out, your mindset's kind of changed now. What's life looking like then? Like how you've got maybe a new fire, determination to really put a spin on this. Can you actually put it into a bit of context? So like how old were you when you left prison for the third time?
Yeah, so I was 18 years old.
That's
you
left.
When I left,
that's fucking nuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So I was 18, and my mum was like going to AA meetings, and my mum was like, "I'd love you to come to one sometime." And like I knew then that something had to change. I had to try and avoid certain people that from my neighbourhood. Yeah, that wouldn't be any good for me. And a lot of them were doing like long prison sentences anyway, but there was a few still hanging around. So I distanced myself from them, and I remember it was a Friday night, and my mum was like, "There's a meeting at Ashford Hospital," and she was like, "I'd like you to come." And so I was 18, and I went along to this meeting on a Friday night, and I remember thinking, God, what a waste of a Friday night. I'm sitting with a load of alcoholics, and I went along, and I think the nearest person to me in terms of age was a guy who was 32, and that was a big barrier for me. I was like, I'm not sure if I belong here. Like I'm 18, everyone's old. When you're 18, anyone 30 plus is old, right?
Yeah.
And although there was a guy who spoke that night, a guy called Brian, and he shared some stuff about his life, and I could really relate to stuff he'd done when he drunk that was just completely out of character. And that was sort of like the moment where it shined a light on, okay, a lot of these people drink and use to change the way they feel. Maybe you do too. Maybe you might be one of them. And I desperately didn't want to be one of them. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I had this stigma around the word alcoholic. I was like, I don't want to be an alcoholic. And so from the age of like 18 to 25, I never went back to prison. Just having my mum sober. My mum's still sober today. She's like 18 years sober. But just having one sober parent was enough to keep me out of prison. And I never went back to prison. but I didn't get sober. I spent from the age of 18 to 25 really trying to figure out, like, you know, okay, how do I get a job? Do you know what I mean? Like, I need to try and figure out how I can get a job. And I got a girl. I was with a girl, and she was great, and her parents were really supportive. And that was like the sort of, you know, the moment where it was her dad, actually, right? Her dad was a big guy. He's called Steve, big, intimidating guy. And he used to banter me for never having a job. He used to call me a nickname, No Mark. He'd be like, all right, No Mark. All right, No Mark. Yeah. And it was like, it wasn't someone being an authority figure pointing a finger in my face, but it was someone shining a light on, like, that I wasn't living like most other people live, right? And that was enough for me to go, fuck, I don't want him to call me No Mark no more. I want to go and get a fucking job. And so it was like only a labouring job, right? But for me, it was a big deal. Like, having a job was a big deal. And that was like the start of it, having a job and then going on holiday for the first time, leaving the UK. You know, I'd grown up in this little, like, 5-mile square radius, you know, literally hadn't left it. And then I remember I went to Turkey, and I just was like, couldn't believe, like, there's a whole nother world outside this little patch of earth in London. And then, yeah, my journey from trying to drink normally, trying to drink like other people, and not being able to, you know, drinking, getting angry, getting into a fight, barely escaping, going back to prison again, you know, just charges getting dropped, or you know, somehow I just escape in prison, and then eventually being like, yeah, I just can't drink like other people. You know, I never drank every day, but I was a binge drinker, and I would, most times, I'd say 60% of the time, I'd do stuff that I would never do sober. Do you know what I mean? And so really, age of 18 to 25 was trying to convince myself that I had a problem with alcohol. And my main obstacle to get over was that I never was homeless, and I never drank every day. And it was like, you don't need to be homeless. You don't need to drink every day for alcohol to be a problem for you. If when you drink, you do stuff that's completely out of character, it might be a problem. And so for me, the stakes were high, because for me, if I was to punch someone and get convicted of it, it's a long prison sentence. So I was like, okay, there's too much to risk here. And so that forced me to look at it. And, you know, age 25 was, you know, when I decided enough was enough. And, you know, thank God I've been sober ever since, you know, 11 years now.
Nice, big decision to...
That's it. I mean, how were those times when you were trying to figure it out? Like, it must be for me, just hearing you talk, it must be the worst time to try and figure out if you have an issue with alcohol, when 18 to 25 is like the prime time for all your mates wanting to party, go on holiday, go to Ibiza, go to wherever you want to go. It must just be like the temptation must be fucking brutal.
Yeah.
And then 25, like, was there ever a moment where you were just like, that's it, what you just said, but was there a defining point where you were like, never again? Because there is, within anyone's journey of stuff that kind of relate to that, is there is like that set point where you're like, right, line's drawn, I have to start, and there's no compromise from this point. Yeah,
there was, but there was more than one. You know, like, I always have to learn the hard way. God, it's like, it's always been my way. It's like, everyone around me could tell me, don't do this. I will have to go and do it, feel the pain, and then realize I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
And, you know, like, but it sucked, man. Like, the thought of getting sober, age 25, fucking sucked.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do on a Friday night, man? What am I going to do on a Saturday night?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to have a boring fucking life, man. And it was just like, one of the big defining moments was, I think it was my 25th birthday, and I was going back to London. My brother at the time was 13, and at the time, like, my brother really looked up to me. Yeah, I was like the apple of his eye. Yeah, and he was really looking forward to me coming back to London. And he'd planned this nice weekend. We were going to do some stuff, and so did my mum, and they'd all planned it. My mum was sober, and so things were different at home. And I got back to London, and one of my old mates knew I was back, and he said, Maisey, why don't you come for a couple of pints? And I remember my girlfriend at the time saying, Michael, man, don't fucking do it. You know what's going to fucking happen. And I was like, no, I'm cool, man. I'm just gonna have a couple of pints. Nothing, no madness. And yeah, I dropped the suitcase at my mum's house, and yeah, man, I was basically drank all Friday night, cocaine through the night, right through till Saturday, all day Saturday, right into the early hours Saturday morning. Ended up stumbling home at like fucking 5-6 o'clock, you know, and my flight back, because I was living in Ireland at the time, of all places to move to try and get sober, I chose fucking Ireland, right? and yeah, I come back to get my suitcase, and my brother was up. It was like 7-8 o'clock in the morning, and he's just really sad. 13-year-old kid, you know. And I was like, fuck, I didn't want to do that to him, man. I really care about my little bro. And that was like, that's fucking it. I'm not doing it no more. And I did drink again after that, though. You know, It took another 2 times. I relapsed in Jamaica. I went on an all-inclusive holiday to Jamaica. I was fucking best man at the wedding. Ended up in the fucking ghetto in some yardie's house, snorting coke. Jeez. They had a search party out for me because you're not meant to leave the resort. Yeah. And then relapsed again after that at my work Christmas party, and had the MD in a headlock choking him out on the floor, man. It was just like...
It's not a good way to get a promotion, mate.
No, mate. And I'd done it all in blackout. I didn't even remember doing it. You know, I turned up back to work on Monday morning, and everyone was looking at me like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And I was thinking, why is everyone fucking looking at me like this, man? And the MD pulled me in. He said, you don't remember nothing about Friday night, do you? And I was like, I can't. He's like, yeah, I was nearly hospitalised, but because of what you done to me. And that was it. It was like I got sacked right before Christmas. It was, you know, I think that was about the 16th of December when I got sacked. And, you know, that was my last drink. You know, I went back to AA livid. And I remember sitting in this AA meeting just saying, if you're new here, AA is fucking bullshit. It don't work. This shit does not work. And I remember like these guys in the meeting, these old Irish guys just putting their head in their hands, shaking their head like, this fucking English guy, I wish he'd fuck off back to London. You know, I was this young skinhead English guy disrupting their AA meetings. And this guy called Sean Carey, he put his arm out to me and he said, look, you need some help, man. He's like, I want to help you. I want to take you through the first 3 steps of the 12-step program. And I always wanted to ask him to be my mentor / sponsor, but I was too scared of getting rejected. I'd never had a relationship with a male in that way. Any interactions I've had with male have been negative all my life. And so, yeah, he took me through the first 3 steps of the 12-step program. And, you know, touch wood, I've been sober ever since. That man saved my life.
Oh.
Yeah, man.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it. So let's try to get it on a bit more of a positive,
yeah, sure,
positive tone now. Like you set the scene, like that's fucking hell. When I got to 18,
a lot to bounce back from.
Fucking
man, like,
so much, crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so career-wise, you know, trying to better yourself now, like after you got sober. Talk to us, like how have you mapped your life? How have you?
Yeah. So after making the last decision, 16th, lost your job.
Mm-hmm.
You knew you was gonna sober up. So what was the step on from there? What was the next job that you went for, and how did things change? Like without touching alcohol again? And
Yeah, sure. So it was really hard. You know, I had to distance myself from a lot of people, and essentially I had to stop like looking out and blaming and criticizing and judging. I had to fucking just look in the mirror and be like, what has been your contribution to this? Like, what are you doing about changing your life? Stop blaming what happened in the past. I get it. What happened wasn't all right. I'm not saying it's all right, but you can't stay stuck there. You want to have a better life. You need to look at yourself. And so anyone listening who knows the 12-step program, the 12-step program is like the quickest way to change a human being emotionally and mentally. And it forced me to look at myself for the first time in my life and look at all the stuff that was holding me back, all the stuff that I'd done wrong, all the changes I needed to make if I wanted to become a better person. And that's really was like the journey I went on, was like, okay, I want all this stuff, but I'm not going to achieve it with the same mindset that I've had all my life. I need to change myself. And so that's where it started, looking at myself. And a job came up with a company called Speedy Hire. I don't know if you guys have them up here, but they drive these red vans anyway. It was just like a sort of yard man job, you know, like cleaning up the yard, which to me was a big deal back then, just to get a job like that, right? And then when I was there, you know, I was sober and I was practicing this 12-step program of being honest, and I was looking at myself. So my mindset was different. I was a nice person to be around. People could talk to me, and, you know, I take time to talk to people. And they eventually moved me from the yard to be a driver. I got my driving license when I was about 8 months sober, and then I was driving delivery man for this company. And then lots of positive feedback from customers, and they were like, okay, we're going to move you in the office. And then once I was in the office and I was learning how to talk on the phone and all of this stuff, they had a incentive where if you upsold any of the PPE, which is like hard hats, gloves, all this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You'd get like commission on it, right? And so for me, I was broke, right? I was broke, but what I did have is that same sort of hustle type mentality from the street.
Yeah.
And so I used that in the office, you know, and I was sort of like, you know, just reminding people, you know, there's health and safety guys on site. Have you got all your PPE? And like slowly everyone started buying the PPE, right? And so I was earning a lot of commission, right? And then I got promoted to sales, and then a job come up back in London with the same company, like being assistant manager. And then I went back, run that. So that was all like my step up the ladder. And then that company, basically a recession hit, and, you know, they made load of redundancies. You know, I wasn't one of them, but there was no commission there to be had anymore. And I was back again. I was like, what am I going to do in my life? I really don't know what I'm going to do. And, you know, a mate of mine who I went to school with worked as an estate agent in London, and he earned loads of money. And he was, I think you'd be a good estate agent. I was like, mate, I can't be a fucking estate agent. Don't you need to go to university to be an estate agent? You know, in my head, anyone who went to work wearing a suit, you have to have some qualification or some shit, right? Yeah. I was like, man, I can't do that. You got to be qualified and shit, don't you? And he was like, no, you ain't got to be. He's like, just, I'll try and get you in if you perform well at interview. And so I went into interview, and it turned into this like mad, like almost a coaching session. This guy who was interviewing me couldn't believe I was like 2 years sober at the time. He was like, you're sober nothing for 2 years. He couldn't believe it. And anyway, I got the job, and yeah, I'd done really well. I worked as an estate agent for about 18 months, like smashed all these targets and all that. But in the 12-step program of AA, it encourages you to live an honest life. So practice it in all affairs of your life. So don't just be a good person when you're sitting in an AA meeting. Like when you leave, be a nice person to your partner, be a good dad, or be good everywhere. And I took it quite seriously, you know, and there was a lot of stuff that went on. I mean, there's a lot you hear about estate agents that don't have the best reputation, right? And there was a lot of stuff I was like, yeah, man, I can't marry the two. I can't live this honest way of life and be doing what my directors are asking me to do. So I left again, and I was just like, fuck, man, like, where am I going in life? All of my mates had mortgages and all this. I didn't even have a proper career yet. And then, but the one thing I did have was a bit of money in reserve, because I wasn't drinking all the time. I had a little bit of money. And so there was an old like landlord who I knew who said, you know, Michael, I love dealing with you. He's like, if you set up your own thing, like, I'll give all my properties to you. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I remember speaking to someone else, and they was like, why don't you just set up an estate agency and do it how you want to do it? Just be honest with people. And I was like, fuck it, yeah, I could do this, man. So I had a phone and a computer in my mum's conservatory, and I set up an estate agent, right? Oh. And everyone was like, it's never going to work, man. You can't be honest, right? Because the main way a lot of estate agents earn business is they'll go to your house and tell you it's worth $1 million when it's only worth, 700, right? And then you sign on the dotted line, you're tied into a contract for 12 weeks, right? And my thing was like, no, I'm just going to go and tell you what your house is worth. And if you want to go with, this guy down the road for more, then you can. But 3 months' time, you'll probably come back to me because I valued it properly, right? And yeah, it just went from strength to strength, really. I've still got the business now. I haven't worked there for 3 years. I put systems in place and made 2 other guys shareholders in the company. But yeah, it's won the award for best estate agent in Isleworth for like 6 years running now.
Wow,
yeah,
amazing, man.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Do you know what I'm getting from your story? It's like, it seems like the more you've expanded your mind, and I guess, like you say, done the 12-step program, brought more honesty into your life, like more of these opportunities started to come your way with
Yeah.
even the job, getting your driving license.
It's like a law of attraction. In a way.
In a way, that's what it seemed like with your mindset sort of getting better for your own self. Like all these opportunities have come towards your way, and things that you thought you couldn't. Excuse me, things you thought that you couldn't do. You've obviously done with like setting up the estate agents and just your conservatories. So that's
Well, there's one thing I left out was that after I'd done the 12-step program, I'd done another course, which is like a Tony Robbins course, which is like a life mastery course. And I was only like 2-3 years sober then, but it really like made me look at all like my relationships to everything, to money, to self-belief. Like money was a big one for me. Like where I grew up, everyone was like on the breadline, just about making enough to survive. And so I became used to having that relationship with money. So even when I earned a lot of money, I would somehow fucking spend it all because I was used to like feeling that anxiety around always living on the edge. And that's like something I had to work on. It's like, okay, you can have money, you can save money. You don't have to fucking spend it all. You don't have to be living on the edge all the time, which is something I think if I didn't look at, I probably wouldn't have ever set up the business. So that Tony Robbins course was a good thing. And I've done loads of other stuff, which all involves basically looking within you. And I still do it now. You know, I do lots of stuff. You know, I still have a therapist because for me, it's like, I know I'll never be a finished product. And if I want to keep expanding and growing as a human being, I have to just keep looking at the man in the mirror. You know, that's my biggest competition is the man looking back at me every day.
No, that's a great point, man. And that's one thing we always touch upon, like self-reflection is fucking a huge thing, like for anything in life, like growth. If you want growth, self-reflection's key. And I think it's something that most people don't do enough, unfortunately. And I think anyone could do it.
It's hard to
give
to face them realities at times, isn't it? Like, like I didn't do that didn't give it enough effort, or I didn't do this to my best ability. It's a fucking horrible pill to swallow, especially when you know, and there's no one you can kind of shift the blame to, like make it a bit easier.
Well, that's it. Like we always say, it's so easy to just like
blame.
Yeah, blame is like make excuses. Like simple one, like someone keeping up for a diet. Okay, I'm gonna eat a Kit Kat. Like it doesn't matter. I'm gonna start tomorrow. It's like excuses. Excuses are easy, but
that's it.
It is tough to look in that mirror and to give yourself like an honest opinion.
It's accountability, isn't it? It's holding yourself accountable, you know, and it's a difficult thing to do, especially when you got to like, you know, where I got to in my life, where you know I had a very successful business. You know, I'm sober. I was sober like fucking 7-8 years. Almost in a position where I could, you know, like retire, you know, and it's like, who's holding you accountable now? You know, because if you got a job, normally your boss would keep you accountable, right? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? And I became a little bit relaxed with it all. You know, stop doing stuff that was good for me, wasn't too good on the exercise, started eating a load of shit. And for me, it was like the pain was made me accountable. The emotional pain of feeling shit was like, fuck, man. I have to do the same things that I'd done when I was 1 week sober. And I have to still do them now. You know, like meditation, exercise, gratitude, diet, you know, all that stuff that, you know, makes me the best version of me every day. I still do. You know what I mean? I'll never be like a finished product, man.
Yeah. That's great to hear, though, because they're things that come up on the podcast all the time. Like Laura Bartlett was the first one to talk to us about gratitude, wasn't she? Yeah. And then we started to do it. It was like, fuck it, let's just do it. Yeah. Steve, was it Steve Ward? Someone said it and we did it, and then someone was like, oh, have you ever? And then he tried Headspace.
Right, okay,
and like, oh, you should try Headspace.
Yeah.
Because if I see someone to like tell me that's like a bit yogi type that I can't relate to, I'm going to be like, meditation's just for you then, isn't it? But he's like, mate, try it.
Yeah.
Do the 30 days. It's a free trial class.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, like, it's little things, isn't it? Like you implement, like you said, and then put it all into place, and it creates a routine that you can then, you know, you got that base to thrive from throughout your day.
Yeah.
So how did you build that? How did you build that routine for, not routine for success, but routine in your life as a foundation to better
keep you
yourself?
accountable?
Yeah. Through pain of like, you know, not doing it and feeling pain, basically emotional pain, mental pain, and being like, shit, man, I need to try something. I need to do something, because, you know, a lot of people, you know, just check out, man. They just check out. Oh, fuck it. I'm gonna go to the pub and have a pint, or I'm gonna go and smoke a joint, or I'm gonna, you know, what you're feeling before you do that are the emotions that you need to feel and process. They're like the signpost guiding you of what you should be doing or you shouldn't be doing in your life. And you just need to sit with them long enough and feel them feelings. And for me, it was that pain where I couldn't go and drink or take drugs. That pain was like, okay, you need to do something. Why don't you try exercise? Okay, I tried exercise, you know, and I've had different phases where for 1 year something will work for me. You know, I used to love pumping weights and, you know, I used to get a real endorphin rush out of it. Anyway, I got to like, you know, 4 years sober and it was like, I just don't get the same fucking buzz out of this no more. Okay, what are you going to do then? Start running. And, you know, even now I love running, man. You know, I just get so much peace of mind out of it. And then figuring out, you know, the meditation as well. You know, for me, it was like the exercise is good. It makes you feel good. But every now and again, I need to really slow down and just let all this chatter in my head just, you know, go. And that's what the meditation does for me. And normally when all that noise goes, I'll get a little bit of inspiration about where maybe I could do something differently in my life. It's like, the way I see it is like, you know, I'm not hugely religious, but I believe there's some power out there, right? And, you know, if you're praying, you're talking to that power. When you're meditating, he's talking to you. Yeah, so you're listening to that little bit of wisdom he's going to give you. And so, yeah, you know, it was through pain of like feeling pain and then thinking, okay, I need to change something. And like gratitude was a massive part, because if I leave myself for long enough focusing on the stuff that I don't have or comparing myself to someone who has more than me, I'll eventually become unhappy, you know? Because I remember like a time in my life when I was like 1 month sober, and it was like, if I could get to where I was when I was 4 years sober, I'd be happy. And then when I get to where I'm 4 years sober, I get to where I am today, I'll be happy. And it's like the goalposts always move. So there's people who have less than I have who are happy right now. You know, so start focusing on what you do have. And really what it comes down to for me is like the simple stuff. Like, you know, you think people are blind, they can't see, like my eyesight. The fact I've got 2 legs, there's soldiers who've had legs blown off, you know. I'm healthy, I'm alive, I've got food in the fridge, I've got a roof over my head, you know. Although I had to go down the path of achieving all that material stuff, unfortunately none of it makes you happy, man. It's the simple stuff that makes you happy.
Yeah, that's a big thing. That's one thing that everyone says. It's like goals make you happy. Having something to work towards will make you happy. That'll keep you focused. Because once you get the thing that you wanted, that's material, it feels good for like 5 minutes, and then you're like,
what's the next one?
What's the next thing? And
that's
what's
it?
it? Oh, they've got this. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you touched on it a lot, and you touch on it more than I do. But you, like Julian, always makes a point of like Instagram is kind of has bred that into people of looking at what everyone else has. Yeah, and it's like
not appreciating what you
reflect back
have.
in and say, all right, I do have this and I do have that, and and I'm proud of that, and I'm grateful for that, and it's something that, you know, listening to you speak, like it's something that everyone should try and adopt into their life. You know?
Yeah, 100%, man. Gratitude is like if you use gratitude every day. I must send about 10 or 11 gratitude lists every day to people all around the world. You know, like people will reach out to me on social media and say, I've got this problem. I say, I've got this problem, blah, blah. I'll be like, okay, every day I want 5 things from you that you're grateful for. You know, and the first time people are like, oh God, I don't know, I'm gonna have to really think about it. I'm like, have you got a roof over your head? Yeah. Have you got food in your belly? Yeah. Can you see? Have you got a phone in your hand? Yes. There's 5, you know, it's like, I'll give you 5 things. Can you walk? Yeah. Okay. So you got a lot of stuff a lot of people don't have, you know, and gratitude is just, you know, I love it, man. I really, you know, I'm a big believer in gratitude.
Yeah. So I want to, and we've had someone on the podcast that kind of told us that they'd applied for SAS. Whether they're going to be on it, I don't know. But they applied for it, and they told us the reason off mic.
Yeah.
If they're listening, they'll know.
What, next year's one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So they were like, "Look, you said something on the podcast, and it kind of like changed my. I was like, oh, I need to go and do something else." So basically, they've achieved, you know, set up a business is fantastic. So like, what was your motivation to go on something that's looks fucking hellish? Really, it looks fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Like, where's the motivation? Why and what drove you towards that show?
Yeah, it was. I had a mate of mine who applied for the series before the one that I was on, right? And he got to like the final stages. Like he had the boots and everything, and basically he's a guy I was mentoring, and he had like a period where he was going through a rough time. And my feedback was, I don't think now's the right time for you, mate. I think you could potentially go on there. You're not in the right frame of mind, and it could be damaging for your image in the world, basically. And so he chose not to. And then, you know, the producers were like, we'll fly him out. We'll fly Michael out. He can be with you and all this. And I was like, I'm not fucking going out. Sitting on the sidelines while they do the fucking show. And so it was that, and then a few people saying to me, you know, you should fucking apply, because I was doing all these Spartan races and Tough Mudders. You know, I love all that. That's, you know, the fulfillment you're talking about. That's where I get mine, you know, getting a medal and feeling like you've done something. And I was like, okay, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to apply. So I was like, I was really late putting the application in, and went along, done the physical test, and then had the interview with the directors like there on the day, got pulled through, and then like got the call the next day just to say, you know, we want to know more about your story. We want you to take a psychological test, loads of different other tests you have to go through. But the one I think they was really interested in was a psychological test, obviously, because convicted armed robber, all these mad charges, you know, suicide attempt. They were like, you know, we need to check this kid ain't going to end up, you know, punching out Middleton on TV. Although they probably like that, wouldn't they? Good television.
They love it.
Yeah, so, yeah, and that was it. You know, like I sort of, you know, I never ever got the 100% heads up, you're definitely in. But it was always like, well done, you passed the psychological test, and well done, you passed this test, and well done. And, you know, and then next thing we was, you know, they said, right, meet us at the you know, at Heathrow at this time. And we didn't know where you were going still. It was all a secret.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what's it like when you get there? What's it?
Yeah.
Break it down for people. Like, I've watched it. I love it. My friends watch it.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff. Like, you want to know, like, what's it really like to be in there?
In one word, brutal.
Yeah.
Fucking brutal. Brutal. You know, like, I think a little bit of, in my head, I thought, I'd watch it on telly. I thought, it can't be that hard, man. I could probably go there and smash this, right? And the one thing I hadn't accounted for was the sleep deprivation. Now, I don't need loads of sleep, but, you know, I need 5-6 hours every night at least, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't get it one night, I'm normally okay. If I don't get it 2 nights now, I'm fucking struggling. You know, it was like 1-2 hours sleep a night at most. And, you know, I left halfway through the process after 5 days. By 5 days, a lot of us were just like fucking zombies, man. You know, like, just going on that amount of sleep is hard enough, let alone getting beasted every day for hours and hours and hours and hours. So, yeah, it's brutal. And how you see it on the telly, it's fucking harder than that. That's like a tapered down version of what you see, really. Like, you know, it's much harder.
What was it like for you? Having, obviously, your mind's kind of, you've adjusted your mind going through the 12-step program, all that sort of stuff. You've implemented stuff in your life that's made you probably the best version of yourself. How did you deal with the fact that they didn't give a fuck about you? Like, they'll talk to you how they want to talk to you, and it's, you know, it's very, very fucking like you are worth. Like, they break you down, don't they? They say they want to break you down, and build you up into what you need to be in the SAS, or you know, to show you on the program. Yeah. But what was that like for you? Did you ever get any kind of old feelings of like,
I didn't, and
I think who you're talking to and all this sort of stuff?
I didn't, you know that, and I think it's because, and I think that's why I went. I think they knew we can't break him down and put him back together. He's already put himself back together. He's like 11 years sober. He's done all this stuff. Yeah. And that really came up, you know, you didn't see it on television, but when I was in the interview room and I was being interviewed across, you know, when you meet the DS, and it was a weird dynamic of where, you know, they because it was on my record that I'd had drink and drug problems, and they spoke about, you know, one of them spoke about, he had the same and he's been sober for a while, and was like, oh, and how long have you been, where are you at with it? You still drinking? I was like, no, I'm sober. How long you been sober? 11 years. 11 fucking years. What the fuck? Nothing for an and it turned into this dynamic in the interview room where it was like, it was just, it wouldn't have been good for TV. You know what I mean? It's almost like I was almost like, in my judgment, I was almost too put together. Do you know what I mean? That's what I think. The one area that I did struggle with, which they didn't show they showed a little clip of it, but was the fighting. You know, like when you saw it on the telly, when you saw Louise fighting Nathaniel, I really struggled watching that because obviously I witnessed violence towards my mum growing up, you know, and I found it hard watching that. And I just couldn't get angry, really. You know, I got paired up with number 18, Rick, who was like, you know, right up for it, you know. And I just, in all honesty, I couldn't get angry. You know, I'd done all this work on myself over 11 years of like, you know, communicating effectively, not resorting to violence. And I've taught other men in prison how to do the same. And now I'm meant to just go into rage. Like Ant Middleton spoke about, you need to go into a red mist. And it was like, yeah, I've purposely
kept yourself out of that,
trained myself not to go into that red mist for 11 years, you know, because for me, the stakes were high. If I go into that red mist, I go to prison.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that combined with the fact I've, you know, more of a finished product, I think is why I went, I think, you know, because physically it wasn't, you know, I was up there, you know, any other contestant you get in here will tell you that physically it wasn't a problem for me. But they knew I wouldn't crack, you know. Ant Middleton had a few snipes at me, you know, like, you're fucking shit, number 11, you're fucking shit.
It sounds exactly like it.
Yeah. But I think they were like, yeah, keep the pressure on number 11. He'll crack and it'll make good telly, you know. And I didn't. It didn't even go in. I just, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so
it's probably nice for you to leave that knowing, like, oh, this shit's fucking worked. Like,
100%,
I've really changed my mindset, and it's actually, people can now listen to your whole story or read about it, and then hear you talk about it. You can say, oh, this shit's it's not bullshit. It's not easy. It's not like taking a pill.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it, you can do it, and it'll work.
Yeah.
If you stick to it.
Well, that was the thing where, like, it really did do that. You know, it really highlighted the changes I've made because, you know, and that's why I thought if that fight was shown, it really would have highlighted it for me because, you know, I was like convicted armed robber, been to prison, and he was a barrister, the guy I was fighting, right? So it was a good, like...
On paper, it's like, you're going to kill him.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But
on paper,
on paper, you would, yeah, right. And then it's like, but actually, you know, this although that is my past, I'm 11 years sober and I've spent 11 years helping other young men not lose their temper, not become better versions of themselves. And, you know, there was a couple of times during that fight where I got knocked down, and that's where I thought in my head, when I get knocked down, that voice is going to be like, right, now you're fucking going to get it, motherfucker. Now I'm going to get up and just be like a crazy lunatic. Yeah.
Security guard comes back.
Security guard is like, okay, right, now you got to deal with me. And you know, I got knocked down. I just got back up, you know, and, you know, I didn't lose my head. And for me, that's massive, massive progress, you know, because obviously I got a wife and 2 daughters, and that's not what children need is a man who can flip off the rails at any moment. They want someone who's calm, collective, can communicate properly. And that's everything, all the work I've paid therapists and people to help me, that's what I want to be.
Yeah.
So it really proved that to me. And so I left quite happy. You know, the producers said I'm the only contestant to cheer when I got back to the accommodation because I was like, yeah, I'm fucking going home. You know, have a shower and a bit of sleep and see the kids and the wife and that, you know, so. Yeah.
Nice, man. That's it. And I think, do you know what, you went back to the whole, like, around your kids and your wife and that sort of stuff. And this podcast really changed my perception of what it is to be like an alpha male. Like an alpha male, like if I'd started this podcast I was a bit younger, I'd be like, oh, he's just a big tough guy and this stuff. And now it's like you have to be way more well-rounded to be defined or maybe be seen or you know, feel like an alpha male. Like you should be a good person. You should be physically in shape. You should be well-read. You should be, you know,
open to new ideas. Yeah,
and not have that ego and, you know, take criticism and understand yourself and, you know, maybe be a little bit emotional, you know, and that sort of stuff. And I think it's nice to hear someone talk about it and break it down in such a way that it's, you know, people can see that. But I just wanted to move on to the working with, how did you get to working with guys in prison?
Guys in prison, yeah. So I remember when I was like a year sober and, you know, you give these, when you go to AA meetings and NA meetings, you give a talk about your life and you talk about the stuff you went through. and people heard like my life story, and they were like, "Fuck, we need to get you in the prisons, man. Like if we can get you, because they run meetings in prisons. They're like, if these inmates can hear your story, it will inspire them, right?" And there weren't many people who were like 25 sober who had a life like mine. There wasn't any, in fact, where I was. And so that's how it started. You know, I'd done my first chair in Feltham Young Offenders, where I spent loads of my time as a teenager, and you know, just had a really good, you know, feedback from the whole room. Everyone was just like blown away. You know, I went in and people were like cussing under their breath, like, "Oh, fucking pretty white boy, what the fuck," and all this, you know.
It'd be a tough crowd, yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, I didn't look like an ex-con. You know, I had my hair done and I'm sober, and you know, and they're thinking, "What's this fucking pretty white boy gonna tell us, man?" And it was on a wing where I'd spent time in one of the cells, and I said, "Yeah, I was in that cell." Spent a lot of time in that cell. It's funny being back here as a free man, and like you could have heard a fucking pin drop in the room. Everyone was like, "What the fuck?" You know. And I went in and I told my story, and there was this, you know, afterwards they all sort of lined up and to thank me. And I remember the prison guard come up to me and was like, "I could never get these fucking kids to go in single file, and you haven't even asked them, they're all in single file waiting to shake your hand to say, you know, thanks for coming in." And it was like, that was like the moment where they were like, okay, these kids need more of this stuff. These people need more of it. And so I got asked to go in and do talks and, you know, through different, you know, charities and stuff like that. And that's really how it started. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you were talking about, you went on a course, Tony Robbins course, and he always says like the secret to living is giving. Like, is that what's kind of now inspired you, like giving back to
100%,
kids that, you know,
so
from a similar background?
Another thing I've done is a course called the New Warrior Training Adventure with a company called the Mankind Project. I think they're actually a charity now. And you go away and you learn really about what it takes to be a man and what your mission is in the world, because sort of I'd got to a certain point in my life where I'd achieved like all this material stuff, but I still felt like, I'm not done yet. It's got to be something more. And it was like, I went on this workshop and they focus on giving you a mission. Like, what is your mission in the world? You know, and writing it out and really having a vision for your life. Like, you know, and I'll read you mine out. So my mission is, I inspire men to become better versions of themselves by using all the tools I have to hand. So how can I do that? How can I inspire men? Well, I can write a fucking book. I created a free online program, which is like free online. You can enroll on it now. Follow the link in my bio on Instagram to help people overcome addictions. You know, I run a men's retreat on my land as well. You know, so my mission is to help men from all sorts of backgrounds become better versions of themselves, and that's my mission. And I get so much more joy out of that, and it's all like free. Obviously I'll get paid for the book, but you know, the other stuff, you know, it's all free, and I get so much, you know, joy out of it from seeing men have these light bulb moments where they're like, fuck, you know, and then looking at their journey like a year on and seeing them, you know, achieving stuff, and then the effect that has on their wife and their kids and their mum and their friends, and you know, and it's like boom, you know.
That's big, man. I think now than ever is like the best time anybody can be doing this kind of work. You know, we live in this age where information's flowing everywhere and people can get access to this type of things and start making changes to their life. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, people didn't have a mobile phone, YouTube wasn't around, and they couldn't access that. So
and that was like the big thing with that course, is like I had to really battle with myself. The free online program for people overcoming addictions, not just alcohol and drugs, it can be anything, gambling, sex, whatever it is, right? Was like, make it free. Like, do you care about it enough? It cost me about 300 quid a month to run this platform. Yeah, I'm in a position where I can afford to do that. Most people who, I know myself, when I was first getting sober, I didn't have no fucking money. I couldn't pay money to enroll on a course, you know. So make it free for everyone. And like what you said, it's make it easy. It's like you can enroll on your mobile phone and do it online. Do you know what I mean? It's like a video tutorial. I talk you all through it. And so, I really believe in that, you know, making it easy and accessible to as many people, you know, just passing on the knowledge you have. Like, we all have knowledge and it's all unique to certain people. You know, like a kid coming up in Leeds wouldn't really connect as much with me as he would with you, because you've grown up, you know, the ins and outs of the city and stuff. Yeah. So it's like both of you guys, like you would have knowledge that I wouldn't have, and it's passing that on for free to the younger generation, because you know how the destiny of this planet turns out, it lies in the hands of that generation up and coming, and it's our job, I think, to, you know, give them all the tools we've learned, including all the fucking mistakes we've made as well. You know, like the big thing is like what you said about Instagram and social media, people posting pics of this fucking perfect life. What a load of bullshit, man. But the way I see it is like, I create the type of social media that I want to see. So what type of social media you want to see? I want to see people being honest and open and vulnerable. Okay, we'll put fucking content out that's honest and vulnerable, and like, share and comment on people that are doing the same. Don't like, share and comment on pictures of girls' fucking asses and guys with their fucking abs out in front of their Mercedes Benz.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, 100%, man.
No,
100%.
that's a big message, man.
It's a massive message.
To sort of wrap up towards the end, then, can you tell us a little bit more about your book? What's going to be in there, and when will that be available?
So the book is available for pre-order now on Amazon. The title is called Young Offender. It's basically my life. I've touched on some of it here on this podcast today. It just goes into my life story in a lot more detail, being published by Pam Macmillan. And essentially the essence of the book is like what my mission is to, you know, inspire people that, you know, change is possible. You know, like if I can get to where I am today with like no qualifications and the life I've had, then I think it leaves very little excuses for you to say you can't get to where you want to get to in your life, you know? So.
Well, that's a massive message, man. I fucking loved having you on here, mate.
Yeah, nice one.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for taking
the time. Thank you.
And
thanks for all the work you're doing, guys, man. You know, we need more of this.
People want to find your page, want to find your
Mr.
website.
Maisey. Yeah.
Maisey.
So on social, all the socials, it's Mr. Maisey. MISTER, Instagram, Twitter. Got a Facebook page as well. Yeah, find me. If anyone's struggling, mental health or anything, reach out, man. I'm active on my DMs. I'll help support if I can.
Boom.
Well,
amazing,
thanks again, man.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Nice one, guys.
Cheers.